I'd like to thank the Center for putting this event on. I think it's a great event, and obviously very well received this year with the crowd we have. I'd like to also thank Karen for inviting me to talk to you today. Karen has heard me talk before, and she invited me back anyway, so I take that as a real good sign. I also got an additional vote of confidence from Karen this morning. When I got here, she said, hey, I think the audience is really going to enjoy listening to the XX story. Just make sure you're finished by 10:30. So we'll do our best. If at year 12 we have to jump right to the Q&A, you'll know what's going on with that. XX has been an ESOP company for 25 years. And it has been a very rocky road for us to success. There have been a lot of things that have happened during the course of that time. There has been a lot of lessons learned in that. And they say that you learn more from your failures than you learn from your successes. And if that is indeed the case, then I'd have to say that X-Tech is probably the most learned company in all of the ESOP world. And I hope that by sharing some of the things that we've learned along the way with you, your path to success will not require so much learning in the process of getting there. So I want to start real quickly. And just before I get into that, it may seem to you as I'm going through some of these things that X-Tech doesn't like being an ESOP, because there's a lot of things we've learned the hard way. But I must tell you that when it works, when an ESOP works the way it's supposed to work, there is no better way to run a company. There is no better governance function or form than an ESOP. And secondly, more personally, despite the fact that I'm really bummed out about Bill's comments about ESOP CEOs making a lot less money than everybody else, I would have to say that as I sit here today, I think I have the greatest job on earth as running an ESOP company. And so I hope ultimately as we get through all that, that will become clear. So anyway, real quick, just about the company. X-Tech is a manufacturing company. We make hard mechanical components that go mostly into steel rolling mills. There's a picture of a steel rolling mill right there. We make the things in the mechanical drivetrain for the rolling stands. We make a lot of the stuff that goes into the overhead cranes in the rolling mill, and we make the lifting equipment that is used to lift the pieces and move them around. We were formed in 1909 as a small family-owned company. Our forte was bicycle bearings at that time, and we still have some of the basic processes today that we developed back in those days. We started in a small plant in Carthage, Ohio, and today we have 5 plants around the world. We're in Cincinnati, we have Hammond, Indiana, we have York, Pennsylvania, and a plant in the Czech Republic. The ESOP, the family owned the company till 1985. In 1985, they sold out to a buyout firm called Westray, and a year later, Westray formed the ESOP and basically sold most of the company to the ESOP at that time. We paid off our ESOP loan in 1994, and we went 100% ESOP in 2001 when we converted to an S Corp. Today we're about just under 100 million in sales, mostly in steel. And you heard from Bill earlier that about 70% of the time ESOP companies come from owner succession. So it's kind of good to put all this in the context of why, among the choices that an owner has, would they go this way? Why would they pick an ESOP as their avenue of ownership succession? So just to talk briefly about that, some of you may not be able to read those, but basically among the options you have, if you sell your company to an ESOP, and that way you can monetize the assets of your company, you can turn that into cash. You can do it with minimal taxes on the transaction, and you can maintain maximum control of your company after the sale. If you think about the other ways that you could sell off your company, none of them provide this combination of things to an owner that would allow them to accomplish these kinds of objectives. That is principally the reason that people do it. It's not the only reason, but it's principally the reason. A lot of times you hear people cloak this in self-righteousness or something like that. You know, I've spent all this time, the employees have been so good to me, I'm now got to give something back to my employees, you know, because of my gratitude and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, to be honest with you, I think a lot of that is a little bit of baloney. And the reason they do it is this. You know, they really do. Now, in fairness to owners, this is often a very emotional, disengaging process. They've spent their life doing this. They've built this company. To let it go to anyone is a significant emotional event for owners to go through. And the fact that it's the employees probably makes them feel better than the alternatives that they might have for letting it go. And because there is an emotional event in that, they expect something back. They're giving something up. They expect something in return from that. And for employees, what they're really looking for is a couple things. They would like their employees to be appreciative of the fact that they're relinquishing their company, and the employees are taking it on over time. They would appreciate appreciation. And also, they would like their employees to start seeing the business and the world the same way they do. You know, they see it as an owner would see it, and they act as an owner would act. And they really would like to have their employees look at it the same way. And seemingly through an ESOP, you can accomplish that. You come to these things, and you're walking away thinking that absolutely is going to be something that happens because of this. So you got like all of this good stuff, and then you got that on top of it. You know, what a great country we live in, you know, here in America. So what do you do if you're an owner? Well, how do you think about that? You know, you come to these things for one thing, that's for sure. And then secondly, you do this stuff. You go benchmark practices. You understand what works best in an ESOP. You learn from the different people who've done it. You benchmark. You get a committee together of people, and their job is to try to make everybody understand what it means to be an owner, what the responsibilities are, what the benefits are, all that kind of stuff. You get your committees together and do that. And then you start to try to get people fired up. You want people to be fired up because that's part of the package. You want people to appreciate. You want people to be acting and thinking like owners. And that's what most people do when they approach this plan. Unfortunately, that process, generally speaking, is doomed to fail. I may be exaggerating a little bit, and I guarantee you there are stories in this room where people have been wildly successful with their ESOPs right out of the gate, you know, with everything working the way they ever dreamed it would. But the statistics Bill cited earlier said 15 to 35% of owner successions fail. No, succeed. 15 to 35% succeed. You know, so in general, this happens. And it happens for a lot of good reasons. But I'm going to try to condense it down to a few things that we see from the time that we've had our ESOP that lend some insight, I think, into why it's so common for this not to work out the way the expectations were when they went into it. And I think one of the fundamental things about that is that people don't necessarily take time to answer a simple question. And the simple question is, when do employees start thinking and acting like owners? Under what conditions does that happen? And why does that transition take place? Most of the time, people don't think through that as they're getting into this. And I'll give you a couple of simple bullets. I'm sure there's many, but I'll give you a couple of simple bullets that I think are criteria that we've observed in the course of time with our company. And the first of those is, number one, is when they have a meaningful financial stake in the company. And there has to be a meaningful financial stake for an employee to start shifting their thinking from being an employee to being an owner. If the financial stake isn't there, they're thinking like employees 99.9% of the time. And they'll act like employees of the company and not necessarily like owners. There are conditions I'll talk about later where that's not the case, but basically a meaningful financial stake. And if you think about it, when an owner sells his company to an ESOP trust, the trust now owns the majority of the shares in the company, or depending on how it rolls out, they own a lot of shares in the company. Unfortunately, those shares are encumbered by the ESOP loan, normally, and they are not allocated to participants. And what really matters is what is the balance in an employee's account of shares. On day one, it's zero. And it takes time to build some balance in an employee's account that makes them start to feel like they have a meaningful stake. There is little a company can do about this phenomena except experience over time the building of shares for an employee. The second thing I think that is critical to this feeling of ownership is when employees have, again, a meaningful control, influence, or input over the strategic or operating decisions of the company. And I would submit to you, most times on day one, you remember the owner's doing this because he can maintain control after the sale is done. Many times the transition here is not clear. And it may take time or maybe never when companies reach this point. If neither of these two things is true, then it is generally true employees will not think or act like owners. If the bottom one is true, or it's built that way, there's a good chance. And I think most companies that succeed early in the process of ownership really work on that one and make it work for employees. If the top one is true and the bottom one isn't, that is a recipe for trouble. And I'll give you some insight into that as we go through the X-Tech things. But basically, those are the key things. And with all of this, particularly with bullet one, it implies a life cycle to the process of building an ownership culture. And for us, it breaks down kind of to three phases. The first phase starts at zero, and on the axes, we have years from ESOP formation, and we have on the other axis, this is the actually allocated stock into employees' accounts. Not what's in the trust, but what's allocated to employees in their individual accounts. The first phase goes from zero to the point at which the allocated stock is now a majority of the ownership of the company. That's the startup phase, we call. The second phase starts from there, and it goes to the 100% point. And here, the employees own a majority of shares in their accounts, but there's a mixture of ownership that includes other elements as well. And then in the final phase, generally it's 100% ESOP. We call that the mature ESOP phase. And I just want to talk briefly about those phases for a second. The characteristics of the startup phase, the employees have little stock. It hasn't accumulated yet. It's still encumbered for the most part. Generally speaking, you're highly leveraged. You need tight control, and there's just leftover habits from pre-ESOP that are natural for tight control of the company. And basically, governance is new to employees. They don't know much about it yet, and so it's new, it's mysterious, and there's not a lot really changed. And I'd say the characteristics, generally speaking, that expectations for this phase are generally very low. Employees don't really know what it's all about. There's cultural inertia. There's low ownership stake. Generally, the expectations in the startup phase are very low. That is, however, unless you overtly act to try to elevate them, which is what the vast majority of companies seem to do. We certainly did it. We had a big party at X-Tech on the day that we launched our ESOP. We put out these bulletins with nice stuff on it, telling them what it's all about, and we had breakout sessions where we were teaching people stuff and all that stuff. Great fanfare. We elevated expectations very high. And then reality set in. In fact, right after the big party, we had an operating crisis. A couple of our customers went bankrupt. All of a sudden, everything's a mess. The CEO goes back into command and control mode once again, and he's firing people, and he's laying off, and he's all this kind of stuff. and he wasn't communicating any better than he did before it all started. And the expectation that got set so high with the kickoff suddenly came crashing back down to reality. And I'd say, really, the lesson, if you do nothing else in the startup phase, do two things. Make sure you get good plan document and good admin in place. You can do that. That's mechanics. You can do it. Get it in place. Make sure it's good stuff. And then secondly, communicate more or differently than you did before. If you used to put up financials on the board, if you didn't used to put up financials on the board, put them up. If you used to put them up on the board, talk about them. You know, have something that is visibly different to people than what they're used to or what they had before, so that through behavior, you're signaling that something has changed. We recommend don't try to hype this. Don't overhype ownership early on, because it will lead to expectations that can't be met. Just a couple of quick things. X-Tech every quarter, that doesn't show too good. Every quarter we have all employee meetings. We show a lot of charts and graphs and stuff, talk about them. We do some for industry, we do some for company performance. I even let my CFO put something up on the board. No 10Qs, you know, none of that kind of stuff, just a single, I give them one page. Say one page, digital schedule, put all your numbers on there, that's great, and put it up. And so we do that. You know, every quarter we do this, and we have, you know, kind of talked through and communicated with employees about what it all means. And that's enough. Whatever you do now, do something different after you become an ESOP or as part of it. Let people see visible change from that. The second phase is what I call the wealth transfer phase. This is a phase where everything really has a chance to get screwed up. Because basically now, employees have a majority of the stock of the company in their accounts. So that issue of that criteria number one about building a meaningful financial stake, that's now coming into play. And yet there's a host of other owners, there's conflicts, there's complexity, there's a lot of stuff that happens in this phase that is very easy for companies to get screwed up. And X-Tech, of course, screwed up this phase as well. And let me just kind of, couple of quick things about it. ESOP debt's being paid down, employees got the meaningful stake. A couple of things that often happen in this phase are they're starting to use stock and options for incentive plans and things like that, which dilutes the shares that are in the ESOP. And so that's why there's complexities about that. And if you don't do things properly, the paranoia builds at a lightning pace among the ESOP participants about this. At X-Tech, basically the CEO didn't change. He didn't see the difference between phase one and phase two. Didn't realize there was something building there. He had a board that was not a pass-through voting board. It was all people he liked, and they were social friends. That was noticed by the employees. With stock allocation stopped right at that pivot point there. So all the ESOP loan was paid off, stock was allocated, and we didn't do any more. And we had new employees coming in all the time. So now you got some employees with stock, you get some employees who don't have stock, and you got a whole lot of new stock going to management that dilutes everybody else. So it was a very messy time for the company. And in fact, as it got late in the process, the CEO's trying to get out. We're doing multiple turnover of trustees and valuation firms, and it looks to everybody like we're just trying to optimize the take of the CEO. And so that left a very bad taste from everybody over the course of time. And that's how really we started the mature phase. Couple quick things, just lessons learned from this. In this phase, you have to recognize that things have changed. People are going to look differently as that meaningful stake builds. They're going to scrutinize more. They're going to be more questioning. And so here, the most critical thing, if you do nothing else, is to get an independent governance set in place. Independent board, independent trustee, independent valuation firm, independent audit firm, and try to stay continuous with that, so that it doesn't appear like you're self-serving in the process. And secondly, this is a good time to start giving people a voice. You remember that second bullet from earlier. Start giving people an opportunity to participate. Pass-through voting is not that scary. It may seem that way, but it's not that scary. Do it. It's a good thing to do in this phase so people start to have a say. They start to have a vote, and we put a lot of committees together to just do simple things, like select the 401k provider, for example. We did that with an employee committee. You know, a number of things that you can do to start to get that input and influence into governance process. So those are the simple things to take away from that. The last phase is the good phase. In fact, I'll tell you, at X-Tech, everything I've told you you should do in the earlier phases, we didn't do until we were already into the mature ESOP phase. But doing them allowed us to catch up very quickly and start to get, you know, to really an effective running ESOP. And here, most of the owners are cashed out, the original owners. The shareholders are highly aligned in their interest with the employees. And that's a neat thing that doesn't really exist anywhere else. There's high alignment there. And what I've learned kind of more than anything else in this phase is that employee owners love reinvestment in the business. They understand, even when they understand that taking on debt, you know, tends to temper the stock price, they love to see reinvestment in the business. And I have always been amazed by how mature and understanding people were about even big things, like big strategic investments, like an acquisition or something like that, and sharing it with them, telling them why we're doing it, why it would make sense. You know, even people who are in their 50s and striking distance of retirement are getting on board. I mean, it's always been amazing to me that worked out that way, but it has. Even on all the heels of all the stupid things done, you know, in the prior years, it's still the case. So this is the phase where you start to really enjoy ownership, where it really starts to make sense, where people start to feel it, because both of those criteria are now met, with meaningful financial stake and with say in governance. This is where it starts, and now is the time to really hype it. To really hype ownership and to expect people to think and act like owners. So just kind of quickly to wrap it up, be cognizant of where you are on that continuum of maturity for your company. And set goals and try to align your practices to the things that make sense for where you are in that continuum. And always be mindful of what makes people tick and what causes their feeling ownership to be there or to be absent. Be realistic about it, particularly in the early stages. Be realistic about how it's going to change. And I think the one punchline I would say also in living through all this stuff is that don't try to change your culture to an ownership culture. Don't try to change it. Change your behavior. You know, do something different. Make it look to employees, now that I'm an owner, something has changed. Something is different, something is better. And I guarantee you, if you approach it that way, the culture will evolve to an ownership culture over time. It may take some time, but it will evolve there. And once it does, there's not, like I said at the beginning, there is nothing better in running a company. And I'd say once again, I think I have the greatest job that there is running one. So I can't take any questions for that, but I will be participating in the governance forum if there's anybody would like to come ask some questions then, or me after that, I'd be happy to. But thank you very much.